The waitress set down my check, looked at me for barely 2 seconds, and then leaned across the table. Her voice was so quiet that I almost missed it. "Go home and take a shower first." I stared at her, confused and embarrassed. For a moment, I thought she was insulting me. I looked down at my old jacket, the sleeves worn thin at the cuffs, and suddenly became painfully aware of how I must have looked. I had spent the entire day outside in the rain, walking from one job interview to another, carrying the smell of wet pavement and exhaustion with me. But there was something in her eyes that didn't feel cruel. It felt urgent. Almost frightened. Before I tell you what happened next, if stories about kindness, second chances, and ordinary people changing someone's life mean something to you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Sometimes a second chance begins with something as small as one person choosing to care. My name is Daniel, and 3 months earlier, I had lost almost everything. My wife had passed away after a long illness, and the medical bills had swallowed our savings. I had also lost my job when the company closed its local branch. The apartment we had shared for 12 years became too expensive, so I moved into a tiny rented room above an old garage. There was a mattress, a broken chair, and one small window that rattled whenever the wind blew. Every morning, I woke up wondering how I would survive another day. I had a daughter named Emily who lived with my sister in another city while I tried to rebuild my life. I promised her every week that things would get better. I promised that someday I would have a home again and bring her back. But promises were becoming harder to make when I couldn't even promise myself breakfast. That rainy evening, I had only $7 left in my wallet. I walked into a small family restaurant because I was tired of being alone. I ordered the cheapest meal on the menu, a bowl of soup and a piece of bread. The waitress who served me was a woman in her early 40s with tired eyes and a gentle smile. Her name tag read, Mara. While I waited for my food, I noticed an envelope sitting beside the cash register. It was covered in children's drawings. A little house, a yellow sun, and 3 stick figures holding hands. I smiled faintly when I saw it, because it reminded me of Emily. Mara brought my soup and quietly placed an extra piece of bread beside it. I thanked her, but she only nodded. I ate slowly, trying to make the meal last as long as possible. When I finished, she returned with the check. That was when she leaned closer and whispered those strange words. "Go home and take a shower first." I felt my face burn. I pushed my chair back and stood up. For one painful second, I thought about leaving without saying anything. But Mara reached into her apron and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She pressed it into my hand. "Please," she whispered. "Don't ask questions yet. Just trust me." Outside, the rain had almost stopped. I walked back toward my room with the paper clenched in my fist. Under the weak light of a street lamp, I unfolded it. There were only 6 words written on it. "Come back tomorrow. Wear something clean." I couldn't understand it. The next morning, I washed my only decent shirt in the sink and dried it beside the little heater. I shaved, combed my hair, and returned to the restaurant. Mara was waiting. She led me to a small table near the kitchen and placed a cup of coffee in front of me. Then she told me the truth. The restaurant owner, an elderly man named Thomas, had been looking for someone to manage the place after his longtime manager suddenly became ill. He had rejected several applicants because none of them seemed trustworthy enough to handle the restaurant's finances and staff. Mara had watched me for weeks. I didn't know that. She had seen me walking past the restaurant every morning. She had seen me carrying a folder filled with resumes. She had seen me helping an old man carry groceries across the street one afternoon. She had seen me return a wallet that someone had dropped outside the bus station. She had noticed something I thought nobody noticed anymore. I was struggling, but I was still trying to be decent. Thomas came out from the kitchen and sat across from me. He asked about my previous job, my family, and why I was willing to work so hard for so little. I told him the truth. I wasn't looking for charity. I was looking for a door that hadn't been locked yet. He offered me a trial position. I accepted immediately. The first weeks were difficult. I worked from early morning until late evening, learning everything from ordering supplies to balancing accounts. Sometimes I made mistakes. Sometimes exhaustion made me short-tempered. But every evening, Mara reminded me why I had started. Then one afternoon, Thomas handed me a small envelope. Inside was my first full paycheck. I stared at it for several seconds. It wasn't a fortune. But it was enough to pay rent, buy groceries, and send money to my sister for Emily. I cried that night. Not because I was suddenly rich. Because for the first time in months, I could see a future. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. Mara asked me to meet her after closing. She placed the same children's drawing envelope on the table. This time, I recognized the drawings. They were Emily's. I looked at Mara in shock. She explained that months earlier, Emily had visited the restaurant with my sister while they were in town. Emily had drawn those pictures and accidentally left them behind. Mara had kept them safe. Then she told me something that broke my heart. The day she told me to go home and shower, she had recognized me from a photograph Emily had shown her months earlier. She knew I was her father. She hadn't wanted to embarrass me. She had wanted me to come back with dignity. Mara had also secretly spoken to Thomas because she believed I deserved a chance. I couldn't speak. For months, I had believed nobody saw me. But someone had. Someone had noticed the man beneath the worn jacket, the exhausted face, and the empty wallet. Mara had seen a father who was still fighting for his daughter. Thomas had seen a worker who could be trusted. And slowly, I began seeing that man too. 6 months later, I rented a small 2-bedroom apartment. It wasn't fancy. The paint was old, and the kitchen window didn't close properly. But there was a second bedroom. I placed Emily's drawings on the wall. When my daughter finally walked through the door, she ran into my arms so hard that we nearly fell over. I held her and cried into her hair. She asked me if I had kept my promise. I told her I had. But the truth was, I hadn't kept it alone. Sometimes life doesn't change because someone gives you money. Sometimes it changes because someone gives you dignity. Sometimes the person who saves you doesn't even realize how close you were to giving up. Mara never called herself my hero. Whenever I thanked her, she simply smiled and said she had only done what she hoped someone would do for her if she ever needed help. And that sentence stayed with me. Because kindness doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives as an extra piece of bread. Sometimes it arrives as 6 words written on a piece of paper. Sometimes it arrives as a waitress leaning across a table and telling a broken man to go home and take a shower, not because she was judging him, but because she wanted him to remember that he still deserved to walk through a door with his head held high. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who may be going through a difficult season, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need a little hope today. And before we end, I want you to do something simple. Comment, "I still believe in second chances," if you believe one small act of kindness can change someone's life. Because somewhere tonight, there may be a Daniel sitting alone, counting the few dollars left in his wallet and wondering if anyone still sees him. Maybe what he needs isn't a miracle. Maybe he just needs someone to notice. And sometimes, that is where a second chance begins.